Speaking to you live from Kameno Island, and we are talking about the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Today we're on quatrain 65, only 10 more to go till the end of the book. And we're still in that pottery shop where late at night the pots representing human beings, the spirit encased in the clay pot of the human body, continue their conversation. Yesterday, when Padma spoke to you, the pots were comparing notes as to different views on what life is all about. One of them speaks up and talks about God as being vengeful and a surly disciplinarian and so forth. And then another one says, "Oh, that's silly. He's a good fellow and all will be well." And so they continued their conversation. And then said another with a long-drawn sigh, "My clay with long oblivion is gone dry. But fill me with the old familiar juice. Methinks I might recover by and by."
Stanza 65. Then said another with a long-drawn sigh, "My clay with long oblivion is gone dry. But fill me with the old familiar juice. Methinks I might recover by and by."
And so our little pots continue their conversation late at night, meaning in meditation as we contemplate the meaning of life, and we first see one thing and first see the other. In this particular conversation, we have one soul who recognizes that the actions of his life, or circumstances, depending on your point of view, have left him high and dry. In other words, he's perhaps jaded, his senses have been overused and abused, he's perhaps tired, a little bit worn out, and yet in this case, this particular pot is optimistic. He says, "I think if I receive some of that old familiar juice of God realization, of divine joy, of my soul's wisdom, I think I could recover." And so this, Yogananda goes on to explain, is of course the soul awakening, reawakening to what's possible, not just to the desire for happiness, but also for the possibility of happiness and knowing where it comes from. Because the pots have just been talking about basically God, who runs this show and what's it all about. So though the conversation here doesn't address God, he does say, "But fill me." And so the conversation is in relationship to a higher power, to God, to the source of life. Now, Yogananda paraphrases, of course, each of these stanzas. I'll quote some of it. "My life is dry with self-neglect. My soul awareness has grown dim. Yet I deeply believe, but if I can drink of the once familiar wine of bliss, I will taste it again." Now, Yogananda has an expanded meaning. It's quite interesting, actually. I'll point out some things. When we live life, as most human beings do, and we live the life outwardly through the senses, what we can see, and the senses include what we think about, our reactions to life, our imagination, our fantasies. All those are perceptions. just one just as real as the other so far as we are concerned. And so I don't distinguish. But we see reflected in life things we like, things we don't like. And I remember, I think I've quoted this before, Swami Kriyananda had a conversation with the first president of India, and whose name escapes me right now, but this man, very wise man, said to Swami, you know, you Westerners think of we Indians and our culture as being superstitious and so forth, but I can imagine no greater superstition than you all have embraced, that mere objects can bring to you happiness. And so it is. It's an interesting way of putting it. It's a superstition to imagine that travel or pleasure or a night on the town, to quote the book here, these experiences will bring us anything other than temporary pleasure or happiness, but with a concomitant letting down that takes place. In fact, he goes on to describe how in so many lives, the almost frenetic effort to go after one thing or another, one person or another, one experience or another, one goal or another. And some of those goals can be very worthwhile, but nonetheless, when we continually go looking outside ourselves to find the happiness that an inner part of ourself knows exists, okay? You know, like in the Searching for the Fountain of Youth, wasn't there some Spanish explorer in what is now the state of Florida, somebody De Soto or something, who went looking for the source of life, what was it, the spring or waterfall or something. And so it's the Holy Grail, in essence, the Holy Grail of happiness. And so long as most people continue to keep looking outside, they invest through their imagination and desire that this object or this person will give them happiness, which even if it does so only temporarily, and then we're left with ourselves only. And so we sort of dry out, in other words, the source of life which is within us. If we keep projecting ourselves out and imagine those objects and experiences will give us something we don't have, but which we've invested in them from what we do have, it's a charade. It just doesn't work. And so we dry up. And not only does the body physically dry up in old age, but so does our happiness, at least our happiness in things. We grow tired. Our body can no longer really enjoy maybe food and other sense pleasures as much as it did, or for as long as it did, or without adverse consequences, which before we perhaps took in stride when our body was young and we could abuse it. This is the common lot of humanity. And so he does a very nice job in this expanded meaning. The other part that he brings up is not just do we go chasing after the happiness outside ourselves, but we also ascribe to our circumstances whatever limitations and perhaps advantages too, as having come to us from outside ourselves. The way we've been brought up, perhaps abuse we've had, or maybe we're born rich and so forth, and so we take pride in that. And so most people, even to the degree that they might also be chasing happiness outside themselves, also look, in a sense, somewhat inside themselves and ascribe to them whatever limitations or opportunities as having come from somewhere else. And to that extent, are weakened in their willpower. To that extent, feel paralyzed, in other words. So there's, as a result of countless outward causes, including numberless failures and disappointments, the heart becomes gradually hardened. And so the sort of pessimistic stoic just says, well, is that all there is? And I'll just go about puttering in my garden or in my workshop, or, going to work and minding my own business. And as I've said before, Frank Sinatra comes out on the stage and sings, is that all there is? And for many people, that is all there is. And so they end up in the grave. They face the final exam of death with ho-hum, or glad it's over, or whatever it might be. But there are those souls, like you and me, who are more hopeful. And the third point that he makes in the expanded meaning is, even though we've worn out our body and worn out all sorts of other things, there are those who will take up arms, like in the Bhagavad Gita, like Arjuna on the battlefield, at first disappointed, at first discouraged, but with the sole encouragement of Krishna, restrings his bow, sits up straight, and prepares to do battle. And so there comes a point in our struggle, no matter how defeated we might be, no matter how much karma our initial efforts reveal to us we must struggle against, we go on. Because, as I think I may have said elsewhere, or in something I wrote to somebody recently, we have to live life anyway. Why not go on and do the right things in life? And besides, as I have said before, and as has been said before by those much wiser than me, joy is within us. The kingdom of heaven is within us. And it's not about low here and low here, as I said the other day. It's not about dying and going to heaven. I mean, all that's perfectly fine. But heaven, or hell, exists right here and now. And this is where the practice of meditation can stop that wheel of samsara, that wheel of optimism, pessimism, striving, failing, succeeding, all that restless activity, at the heart of which lies the Holy Grail. Okay, so let's be optimistic. Tomorrow, Padma comes, and let's just peek on ahead. Are the pots going to... Oh, yes, the pots continue to talk, but it's a good one. So tomorrow, 12 noon, or afterwards by recording, let's continue our discussion between the pots. Okay.